Now I would like to introduce Marshall County Sheriff Steve Hoffman, who has good insights on law enforcement service and life situations.
Thank you, Kit, and our audience. And first I'd like to ask, who among us does not know or love a veteran or a first responder? And for those of you that aren't present here today, there's not a hand that went up. And the sense of it, you can't go in our society and not be touched by our military presence in this country and our first responder community. It's the fabric of our society, the people that are servant driven and have given many stages of their life in service to their country and their communities. And that comes with a toll and a cost. And sometimes that is at the expense of the mental health. Sometimes it's at their lives. Myself, I'm a second generation officer. There's been one of my family members serving since the 1960s up through today. I'm nearing a few months away from my 30th anniversary in law enforcement and currently serving as the Marshall County Sheriff. Come from an extended military family. My brother retired from the military. My uncles have served in the military, nephews, stepfather. And so through my lifetime, I've witnessed and lived through their stories from Korea and Vietnam, my brother's experiences in Kosovo and Iraq and Afghanistan. To have a somewhat comprehensive understanding of the tolls our military service has, as well as a lifetime of experience in community public safety here stateside. One thing that has changed over the course of my career has been the recognition and a changing in culture of mental illness. There was certainly a silence where a person couldn't begin to talk about their own mental health in this type of career. So I'm very proud to know that the culture is changing among law enforcement leadership, public safety leadership, and military leadership, where people can feel safer to have those conversations. But one of the things that was an aha moment for me in recent years with speaking with a PTSD survivor from another state, he had a conversation about how individuals will recognize from their leadership when they're genuine in asking if they care. For example, when my people experience a traumatic critical incident, it was not unusual for me to ask how they were doing. Are you okay? And people know if you're being genuine or not, but who in their right mind, perhaps, when being asked by somebody in a position of leadership or authority, would say that they're not. It's the phrasing of the question, and what I learned from that conversation was to come from a place of my own vulnerability, particularly if we're dealing, with a child death, any type of trauma or critical incident. I'm like, oh my God, that sucked. How are you doing? I'm tore up about that. To open myself up to that vulnerability and allow that conversation to develop rather than the first thing that our people are thinking is like, is he going to try to put me on administrative leave? Is he going to try to get to me? We have to make sure to establish that base to the people that we serve with, that they feel comfortable opening it up and that they know it's okay and that it's going to be in a safe environment. Another rattling moment that I'd had in recent years was a close friend of mine that has spent nearly 4 decades in fire service and law enforcement service. And then I had found that on 2 different occasions, he'd had a plan and he had placed a gun up against his head just to see what it felt like, because he was at a point where he was ready to take his own life. And he's probably one of the bravest people that I know in how he reached out for help, and that even when he wound up admitting himself for hospitalization, even though he went to an area not near, he still wound up having contact with people that he'd had professional contact with. And he was at a point in his life that it didn't care, and he worked through those issues. But that is another consideration for our first responder community, for wherever they go in this state, that there is a chance that somebody that they're hospitalized with is somebody that they have perhaps had professional contact with. Another change that I'm proud to have seen develop in recent years are peer support groups. And for our audience with that, if you're going to establish a peer support group or you want to be involved in a peer support group, there's nothing, I don't believe, on earth that could shatter the potential benefit of that without, if there's a lack of confidentiality. And I would say in our law enforcement community, there are many things that we can keep a secret about a close investigation, but to be frank, there's a lot of gossip that goes on in government. And if you gossip about your coworker's mental health or somebody that's suffering, that will destroy a peer support group in a heartbeat. Nobody will ever trust you. Nobody will ever trust that effort again. So we have to have trust. We have to have confidence. It has to remain confidential. For years beyond our military mental health and our first responder mental health, there's been an ongoing discussion and dialogue on mental health across the state and across our country, including jail environments. It's important that we work together to reduce the stigma of mental illness at all aspects of mental health. Nobody would, ever question or believe that there's a stigma associated if I had diabetes or if I have cancer. We have to think about our issues affecting the order of our brain as being organic issues, as being medical issues, and not be something to be embarrassed and to be shrouded. I think that's just so very important. This past summer, a colleague of my wife, a high-level medical professional, he took his own life while we were on vacation. She received that message. Our kids go to school together. My wife had obviously worked with this medical professional. And it's important to recognize that we don't always know what's going on in somebody else's life or day to day. From the outside looking in, I would have thought that this person had the perfect life. And obviously they didn't. And they didn't think that they had the outlet to help them through their problem. I heard it touched earlier on asking those difficult questions. And I'd like to take it one step further. In much the way that I wouldn't ask somebody that I had for a theft investigation, I wouldn't say, Kent, you didn't steal that, did you? I don't want to ask a question in a way that I'm soliciting a no response. I want to ask that question very directly, as our previous presenter said. I want to directly ask, are you thinking of harming yourself? Are you thinking of killing yourself? And again, as was mentioned, you have to be prepared for the answer that may shock you. And you have to be prepared to spend that time with that person and to help find those resources. On any given day, our military people and our public safety professionals find themselves in harm's way. And across what's shameful in my nearly 30-year career is that when I went to the Law Enforcement Academy, I was told at that time, there are more of you, more of us, more peace officers that kill themselves than are killed in the line of duty. That was true 30 years ago, and what's shameful is that's still true today. There are more officers that kill themselves here in 2019 and 2020 than are killed in the line of duty, and that's been a fact for decades and decades. That's something that we have to strive for as a society and our family members and our workplace cultures to find a solution for. My coworkers, my peace officer coworkers, they're 5 times more likely to suffer from PTSD, and they're multiple times more likely than the public at large to kill themselves. In fact, in a recent study within the last 2 years, law enforcement was found to be the highest risk occupation in the country for employees to kill themselves. That's a trend that we can't accept. As a leader in a law enforcement community in Iowa and this country, I don't accept it. And I hope that you'll join me in not accepting this as an attendee, as a family member, as a community member. If you'll step forward, make sure that you ask those hard questions, support your family, support your friends, support your community. And I thank you so much for your attention here today, and Kent for his unwavering work at supporting us and the things that we do in our communities every day.